Friends, and I'm delighted to have with me today on our show Duncan Newcomer. Duncan is coming out with Santa's Books with a new book called Quiet Fire. It's about the spiritual life of Abraham Lincoln. And Duncan, welcome to the show today. I'm delighted to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really glad to be here.
Why don't you talk a little bit about the history of this book? Where did the book come from? Why now, Duncan?
The the book is unique in both what it offers now and how it came to be. It's unique because it's a lifetime study. I started feeling the presence of a quality of sacrificial love in Lincoln in a movie I saw when I was 14, Raintree County. And that spiritual dynamic stuck with me and led me to him again and again and again. And in seminary, I wrote about him and his education as a matter of his learning language. And through my different careers as a preacher, a poet, a psychotherapist, uh, minister, the different aspects of Lincoln continued to speak to me as a revelation of what I now see as the Holy Spirit. So that's how the book came to be, and that's it's all contemporary writing. It ended up being a radio show here in Maine, a short feature for 3 years, or for 6 years. There's 300 different podcasts. Um, why Lincoln now? Lincoln had what I would call an ability to live with what we could call convergence freedom. You know, both the North and the South, and I went to college in the South, felt like they were fighting for freedom. And in a way, that civil war is still going on. So, how does freedom happen? And is there something that we could call convergence freedom, freedom for both? And Lincoln, both spiritually and then politically, had that charisma, that spirit, that charm. But when he wrestled with Jack Armstrong, when he met this first gang in the little town he moved to, he made sure he shook hands with them at the end of the battle. Nobody was sure who won. They knew that Lincoln didn't lose, but how he really won was he made Jack Armstrong his friend. Later in his life, he defended Jack Armstrong's son in a murder trial and got him off. That famous, we say that in a famous movie with Henry Fonda. Um, so Lincoln had an ability to have a poise inside of paradox that we need. You and I need to feel free to be ourselves and to let other people be themselves. And the only way we can do that is to have a spiritual stance that sees the other as a moral equivalent of us, and that our inner space of freedom is secure. And Lincoln, even psychologically, had a secure inner space of freedom. It was just remarkable. Uh,
When you talk about the spiritual life of Abraham Lincoln,
yeah,
why do you go with spiritual life and not psychological, emotional? I mean, you brought up both, but you've
right.
emphasized the spiritual life of Abraham Lincoln. What do you mean by that? Why spiritual life? Spirituality.
Like a lot of 19th century men, he was God haunted. He was grew up in the Free Baptist Church, willingly and unwillingly. He was the candle counter in a church that his father helped build. Uh, so he was deeply aware of God and the Bible, and the Bible was quoted in the school reader. There was a secular sacred combination in our culture that's that got through to him. Um, I say spiritual because he ends, as Randall Niebuhr said, as our most theological president. And that is because he believed that God was the ultimate power behind the willing conflict that we were both in. And he was so troubled by why couldn't he end it? After all, he was president. And so he wrote a deep meditation to himself, which he folded and put in his desk, called a meditation on the divine will. So while I can look at Lincoln psychologically and even historically and politically and emotionally, he wouldn't look at himself that way. He understood himself as someone wrestling with God. And uh, I see a spiritual uh, hero in Lincoln because of his perception of himself. When sorrow came to him, he turned, when his sons died, he turned to Presbyterian ministers. And both of them, James Smith and Phineas Gurley, were highly educated doctrinal Presbyterian ministers. And so he wrestled with his own sorrows through religious categories. What he didn't do was because he was an Enlightenment Jeffersonian in some ways, he um, he began as an agnostic and a deist. Um, he never brought himself around to joining a Christian church. He was never baptized. And the life of God in the Old Testament spoke to him historically more in an applicable way than the messages of Christ, although the mercy and charity of Christ deeply affected his heart. Uh, and I think was, you know, he sounds Christ-like by the second inaugural, and that's what Leo Tolstoy said about Lincoln. He was the greatest of all presidents because he believed in loving the enemy. Loving the enemy is another way to talk about convergence. um,
So Duncan, if that's why Lincoln, why Duncan? Why Duncan Newcomer writing this book?
I have been, I didn't, I, in a way, I don't know. It's the kind of deep thing that happens to you in your life when you can look back and see a thread and say, I get it. Um, all my different careers have given me ways to have unique insights about Lincoln. Uh, you know, for for example, my career as a psychotherapist taught me the value of the subjective voice, and I'm willing to use the subjective voice in my book. Uh, there's a story about Duncan that begins the book, and there's a story. It's not an autobiography at all, nor is it historical fiction. But it's told from, and people will tell me this that read it. It's told from an intimate, interpersonal, subjective point of view that most historians and politicians and political scientists are just have been afraid to go to. So Duncan, because um, I seem to resonate with his language as a poet, his masculinity as a man, his family structure as a therapist, and his inner theological, if not gospel message as a preacher. And I've been all four of those. So you're not going to read another book about Lincoln like this one. This is a unique book in that.
That was a segue to our last question. What is
Yeah,
this thing about this book? What is the unique contribution of this work, Duncan?
it comes from a multitude of perspectives, these ones I just mentioned, in which I'm an authentic voice, if not a towering figure. So that's unique, and you'll know it as you read it. And what it reveals about Lincoln, my stepson said, I have a depth of understanding and a context for Lincoln I've never had before in any of the scholarly readings that I've read about Lincoln. So, uh, is that your question?
It is. That's marvelous. And I have to say, as one reads it, you do get and I can't come up with the exact word, but it's this interweaving of your life and Lincoln's Um, that they're distinct and yet there's so many similarities and overlapping. And I'm intrigued by you saying I'm not a towering figure, but I'm an authentic figure. Can you just push that out a little bit as we close?
Sure. And I've done a lot of writing over the years for a journal called Read the Spirit, and they refer to me as a Lincoln scholar. Well, I have a doctorate, but uh, I don't consider, I know Lincoln scholars. And if I was in a group with them, I would sit in the back row. Uh, but if I can do anything, I can speak authentically in ways that even scholars are afraid to.
I just want to encourage the readers to get a hold of this book because I think it portrays Lincoln in such a way that is so different from the way political leaders are portraying themselves these days. And of course, Lincoln could not have portrayed himself the way you portrayed him because it was he had the kind of modesty that would have prevented that. But you came alongside of him and did that for us. Thank you so much, Duncan. We're really grateful.
Thank you for this incredible opportunity. I
And
can't
thanks for
thank
the
you enough.
interview. You can find this book anywhere books are sold, called Quiet Fire by Duncan Newcomer. I encourage you to pick it up and be inspired. Thank you, Duncan.
Thank you, Conrad. Thank you so much.